fight and we're looking good. You'll be in for a fight and we fight pretty good. Getting goals is our job and we get goals good. Looking good, we are Carlisle United.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Brunton Bugle, the number one place to get your car night fix in the podcast world. I'm Lee Rooney.
I'm Mike Booth.
And I'm Dan McLennan.
A narrow defeat at Bradford brings the season to a close and United's finish in 20th in League 2. But it's as busy off the field as the release list is published with some surprise decisions, players allegedly being tapped up and a familiar face returns to take on the Head of Recruitment role. Yes, we finished in 20th place. Not 12th, as I said the first time I tried it out. We wish. Blimey. Well, it's all over. Season's done, lads. Pretty glad to see the back of it, really, aren't we, overall, over the last couple of months, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I would have bit your hand off for 20th after that Swindon game.
Absolutely. I mean, the turnaround of the last few months is incredible. We're not going to review the season this episode. That's for next week's episode. Basically, we're going to go through that. So today, it's a slightly smaller episode than normal because we obviously haven't got any preview section to include. We're going to review the Bradford game. It's going to be brief. Me and Mike will talk about it for about 5 minutes. Then we'll do a bit of news because there has been quite a bit of news this week. And then we're going to go through the retain list and have a 15-20 minute discussion or so on that. So there you go. And obviously the X-Files bit at the end. So getting straight into it, Mike. Bradford game, lost 2-0. That nice little day on West Yorkshire. Just typical end of season affair, wasn't it? Really, wasn't as bad as some of the other games I've seen at the end of seasons, but at the end of the day, it's one of those games where having that makeshift midfield has really caught up on us, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really a 2-0 game for me. Obviously, it was 1-0, and we absolutely should have had a penalty, and our heads just went when we didn't get the penalty, and then we conceded the second off the back of that, and yeah, I think on the whole we created some very good chances, and we got the ball in the final third well. But one of the things that Simo said in his post-match was that certain players, naming no names, were just hitting it from 40 yards and just killing all the momentum that we had.
And that'd be Jordan Gibson, then I'm presuming he means that.
Yeah,
because he had 2 or 3 shots from that far out. But I mean, to be fair, he was just trying to force the issue, really, wasn't he? I suppose it's fair to say. I mean, you listened to it on the radio, I'm guessing, Dan, because I think you were in work, weren't you?
I finished just before kick-off,
okay.
But I had a couple of things to do, so I was driving about listening to it. And the one highlight, which we'll cover in more detail later, was when a certain Greg Abbott was there. Obviously, Greg is ex-Carlisle, he's ex-Bradford. Mm-hmm. He was involved in that terrible day at the Bradford fire, of which it was the anniversary. Yeah. And as we'll mention later, after that we did sort of say, interesting.
Yeah.
But the actual game itself, it sounded similar to Harrogate to me.
You know what? I saw a few people saying that, Dreadford, it just shows how bad we were. I don't think we played that badly. I think people really need to take a step back sometimes and look at it and say, we had a makeshift midfield. Brendan Dickinson was playing holding midfielder for the second half, and he's not a holding midfielder, and I do feel for him a bit in that situation, because playing as a sort of player on the wing, as a wing back, whether a winger or a full back, is quite different to playing in the centre. Some players can do both. Joe Riley, for instance, was pretty good at doing both. Was funny as hell. Hannah was, yeah. But some players it just doesn't suit them, and I think we did okay. I've got to say, Mike, I thought young Jack Ellis had another great game at right. I think we both agreed he was our man of the match for us, wasn't he?
Yeah, definitely. And I think first half they targeted him a little bit, and the ball was down his side quite a bit. And at half time they realised that they weren't actually getting much out of that. So second half they played it down the middle.
That's only natural for them to do as well. Because,
absolutely, yeah.
That shows they've done their homework, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But no, the lad had a great game, and bear in mind he's not really played wing back before. He looks like he'd be quite useful in that position. Someone you could definitely mould into doing a similar role. I mean, he probably had one of our better chances in the first half as well, didn't he? And his eyes lit up and he saw the goal and he hit it, and it was maybe a yard or two over the bar. It was fairly well struck, but yeah, like you said, the best chances we had. I mean, there was one chance in the first half with a decent move. I think that Dennis actually started and he got it out wide and he got into the box and he just couldn't get on the end of that low ball, could he? And if he slid in a bit more, he might well have scored. But I think actually, having seen the photos now, because it was difficult from our angle, the ball was actually behind him, and that's why he didn't actually get to it in the end. So it's frustrating. Jack Armour had a brilliant chance in the second half, and he was played through. And I don't know what he did. he slowed up a little bit, didn't he, Mike? He seemed to take his time, and fair play, Alex Gilliard came out of nowhere and blocked him. I don't know
he did.
how he managed to it, but he never should have had the chance, really. It's a little bit criminal that was missed. And then, like you said, the Dennis one, to me, it looks... For me, I think he should get his shot away early anyway, but as he's setting himself to shoot, he does have his legs taken away. And how the ref can't give that,
And if he didn't have his legs taken away, their guy handballed it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing, yeah. Because the ref was so busy waving away the protest, he didn't notice that Sonogo actually palmed it with his hand on the floor to get it under control. So, yeah, it's just one of those days with that kind of thing, isn't it? But in the end, you know, I don't think it was a criminally bad performance in that sense. I think the work's hard. It's just one of them days. It never really went for us. If we had put it this way, if we had Guy and Devitt in the midfield in that game, I think we would have won that. I think we would have won comfortably. I genuinely do. We've got to talk about a couple of the things away from the actual game itself. I mean, first up, Mark Hughes' behaviour at half-time. What on earth was that about?
I mean, for them to upload a video footage of it as well, it's just weird, isn't it?
Brain dead. I mean, you're just asking for an FA charge, aren't you, really?
Yeah.
The fact that it was taken down a few hours later probably tells you all you need to know. But
yeah, someone's definitely made a call there, haven't they?
Probably Hughes himself said, come on. You know, I know I did it, but let's not get me in trouble here. But essentially, he barged into Gavin Skelton's when there was a little bit of... It wasn't even handbags, it was a little bit of shouting, basically. And he just got it all kicking off. And then John Mellish wanted to get involved. And then John Mellish ignored it. And then suddenly their captain grabs John Mellish out of nowhere. And then by the end, Mellish is like, whatever, mate. And just
I did notice there was like a little step up onto the pitch, and Big Dinnell was slightly off balance, so he fell back. But once he sort of steadied himself, there was one or two seemed to suddenly back down very quickly.
Yeah. Before we get into the other incident, shall we say, I've got to say one thing I'm not happy with Paul Simpson about. Didn't get our final run out for Big Dinnell, did we? So all our predictions were never going to be right. Whatever happened. But yeah, well, let's talk about what happened before the game. Pretty disgraceful, isn't it, really? Essentially, there was, as you mentioned, you'll mention later, Dan, I'm sure, in fact, in terms of Greg, there was a minute silence for the remembrance of the Bradford fire disaster. They played You Never Walk Alone over the tannoy. There was a bit of boom when that happened. Now, I think people couldn't, because you can't really hear the tannoy at like these grounds. I think people just thought, why are they playing, Liverpool's song, Boo, whatever, that kind of thing. I think there was a misunderstanding there. I'd like to think. I'm not 100% certain of that, but that's
I was told from someone who was there that someone did try to start a song, but apparently they'd come out the toilet when they were doing it. As soon as they realised, they were like, "Oh, shit!"
For me, there was a few just at the start of the mid-times who were still coming to their seats and didn't know what was going on. And then I think it was about 30 seconds in, wasn't it, Mike? One bloke just started out everywhere we go, and I'm not convinced he just come out the toilet. For me, I don't know because I couldn't see. We were a little bit.
Someone else,
I think there was two. There was one behind the goal, and one in our bit. I think, and it is literally just two idiots that did it, and then they all started getting shushed and basically.
Certainly not representative of everyone else who
travelled. No, absolutely.
And, there was a bit of chattering at the start, and quite a few people were sort of shushing. The people who were doing a bit of chattering, and then. Yeah, like you say, they sort of sang, and the Bradford fans, some of them were quite annoyed that our fans told them to shut up, and, I can semi-see where they're coming from, but there's no guide. I've never once been to a game and our fans have sung during a minute's silence. It's an absolute disgrace, and the Bradford fans themselves were saying that they've done this on the last game ever since the disaster, and no other team has done that, and there's no sort of guide on how to behave if somebody is making a noise during a minute's silence. But
let me say this is not an excuse for it. It's a reason why it probably happened. There was a lot of very oiled up people, to say the least, in that game. Probably on things other than drink as well, if I'm being brutally honest, because there was a big queue for the cubicles in the men's at half time, to put it bluntly, and I'm pretty sure not all of our fan base had the bad runs that day. And I'm sure there were some incidents in terms of seats being broken towards the end as well. It's great that we've had such big support these last few games. You point out, Dan, that it's incredible.
Yeah, I put a post up on Twitter, didn't I? And it's
fantastic. But some elements need to calm down a little bit. Let's just put it that way. And I think we'll leave it at that for the Bradford game. That's just basically saying we're not very impressed with what happened, to say the least. Right, well, let's move on to the news then, guys. I mean, where do we start on this then for this week? Obviously, we're going to cover the retained list separately as an actual section. But in terms of news...
I think the head of recruitment is the main one.
Well, yes. I mean, as you mentioned, there was a lot of talk last week, wasn't there, in terms of, who's it going to be? We had a few names mentioned. There was a fellow at Blackburn, possibly. Paul Murray's name was thrown into it. He's doing a similar job at Blackpool.
Blackpool for that. I think it's the under 23s in the academy more for that, isn't it?
I think even Mick Wadsworth was mentioned recently.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't either of those ex-Blues. It was Greg Abbott returning to the club to take on the head of recruitment role. He's been doing a similar role at Solihull Moors for quite a while now. I think maybe this year, because Neil Eardley's there. He's a good friend of his, isn't he?
Just on the mention of Solihull there.
Yeah.
There was one or two Carlisle fans went, he's been working at Solihull Moors. Who were there? You mean the team that are third in the National League and would probably have beat us for 2/3 of this season?
Yeah, with two strikers who are pushing on 20 goals this season.
Well, one who was linked to us in August.
Dallas. And the other lad as well. Yeah. So, it just goes to show, doesn't it? But yeah, so he's been doing his role with Neil Eardley. He's generally been following Neil Eardley around, doesn't he, really? As an assistant or a head of recruitment or something. He did something for Mansfield for a little bit. Obviously, he was at Bradford when they took Charlie Wyckoffers, and I think he might have been there when they signed Callum Guy on loan, possibly as well in the past, and a couple of others. So,
I'm going to get my oar in, and as I alluded to earlier, we were chatting on WhatsApp on Sunday, and I did say, Greg Abbott was there. I think it was Lummy grabbed him on the mic quickly on the radio. Obviously, I was listening as I was driving about, and we did sort of say, because he did mention there was a whisper that. Paul Simpson was waiting on someone to tie some loose ends up. I think he said that in an interview. Yeah. And obviously, Solihull, he just literally finished at Solihull. Yeah. So it was like, and we went, well, there was another name that seemed to have a bit more traction, but, the hunch was right in the end, And
Yeah, fair play. You did say it. And I think... on this pod, we're in agreement. We think it's a good appointment. I mean, Mike, you've said it before. He's got a real eye for a player, hasn't he, at this level?
Oh, he does, yeah. And, some people say, but, he didn't play Paddy Madden and Naki Wells, but he found them,
He did, and I think there's a little bit of rewriting of history on that. Anyone who saw Naki Wells playing for the reserve team would see he was not ready. And who are you dropping for him? Rory Loy? Francois Zoko?
Exactly.
John Paul McGovern? Lee Miller? These are all experienced lads. He was a lad just coming over from Ireland. It's just, there's a little bit of, luck's probably not the right phrase, but a little bit of, right player, wrong time, basically, wasn't it, with him coming in, really? So it happens sometimes. Sometimes players settle elsewhere and do all right elsewhere. So, it's one of those things. But like you said, you can spot a player in loan signings. I mean, people will pick out the ones who weren't very good, but actually, his hit rate was pretty strong. Even picking out players who were just, maybe unknowns and you never really heard of.
James Chester, Ben Marshall.
Yeah.
I mean, even no manager has 100% success rate with signings, do they? Let's face it.
No. I mean, even like some gems that you've never heard of before. I mean, I remember when we signed James Berrett, I was working at the club and I thought, I know some people don't rate him that much, but he scored 10 goals a season, 2 seasons in a row from midfield for a player that's supposedly anonymous. I know he scored a few penalties, but...
What would we give for one of them this season just finished,
100%. And like Liam Noble would be like that. So it works really well. He doesn't have to be based in Carlisle. And as Simo said before, actually being based a bit further down the country is a better position for us because he can get to more games. He can do more stuff. It seems to be the thing
I wouldn't expect him to be here on a Saturday because he should be watching players.
Yeah, he should be coming up a couple of days a week.
He'll be at some games, obviously, but...
Yeah,
if targets have been identified, he will be watching them.
Absolutely, and like I said, I think
not sat on a laptop watching a little clip on Y Scout.
No, absolutely. He's an old school one. He'll go and do that. Jakey Blaine can give the input in terms of that sort of stuff as well, can't he? So you've got a good mix of both, and that's what you want. You want to do the new and the old, really. And like Simo says, sometimes you just need someone to go and watch a player. And look what he's doing. What's he like when the opposition have got the ball in the other half and stuff like that, and seeing how he reacts. And I genuinely think it's a really smart appointment. It's a really good one, and like I said, you can spot a player. And like I said, a lot of the time it would be what Simo wants him to go and watch. And Simo said he doesn't want someone who's a yes man, does he? So yeah, I think it's a genuinely really good appointment. And good to see him back at Brunton Park. And, I think with hindsight, a lot of people look back now quite fondly on his time in charge. I mean, that last year, I think most people can see now the rug was pulled from him, wasn't it? So there you go. Other bits of news, a couple more bits of coaching news. Paul Gerrard has agreed an extended deal to stay on as goalkeeping coach. I think we're pretty happy with that, aren't we, guys?
Yeah. I'll allude to something when we talk about the retained list, but Paul Simpson talked, he'd been a breath of fresh air since he came in, and he clearly wanted to keep him, and he's clearly enjoyed his time here. So
yeah. Fantastic. Other little bit of it, it's a bit sad news, I suppose you put it this way, but Eric Kinder's left the club. That's just been announced today, hasn't it, Don?
Yeah, he went part-time a little while back, hadn't he?
Yeah, there's some suggestions that maybe he didn't necessarily see eye to eye with Chris Beach, possibly. That was some murmurs, wasn't there, in the past? And I think actually it suited him quite well, wasn't it, going part-time, really? So yeah, he's moved on, basically, and Mark Budge. But Mark Budge has been doing most of the work for quite a while now, hasn't he? Really, so yeah, it's what a servant he's been in terms of the players he's brought through in recent years. Though it's incredible, isn't it, Mike? When you look back and
definitely.
Brad Potts, Dave Simonton,
Kyle Dempsey.
Kyle Dempsey. Well, yeah, Kyle Dempsey come through just before he left, didn't he? I think, but just after he left, but he would have been there developing and stuff. Yeah, Mark Gillespie. Players have done fantastic for us, some of them in recent times. So yeah, good luck to Eric. I'm sure he'll always be welcome back at Brunton Park. What other bits of news have we got to cover? Should we cover the awards briefly? And Dan, it's pretty quick, isn't it? Well done, Mark Howard.
Mark Howard won most of them.
More on him in a minute.
Lewis Alexandra, more on him in a minute. Got the goal, which for the team goal against Stevenage.
Yeah.
Rod McDonald shared one of the awards with Mark Howard. I think that was the Westerwolf man of the match, the home game man of the matches. But it was pretty much a clean sweep for Mark Howard. Jack
Ellis was the youth team player of the season. No massive surprise there, really, is it? I suppose if Sam Fishburne had played for the youth team most of the season, he might have had a chance with that. But it makes sense for Jack to get that award. Just listing the ones Mark won: Kiosk Player of the Season, London Branch Player of the Season. Where we at? I'm trying to look for it. Sorry, Westerwolf Player Man of the Match. Obviously, you mentioned there. Mark Howard shared that with Rod McDonald. Season Ticket Holders Player of the Season, Mark Howard. Players Player of the Season, Mark Howard. So yeah, he's won all those. Morgan Feeney also got the Champagne Moment Award, didn't he, for his goal against Oldham, essentially, because that's what London Branch do, a little bit different award, isn't it, really, in terms of focusing on that kind of thing. So fantastic for. And
let's be honest, it was a hell of a moment.
The only one I could think that could maybe go near would be Toby's goal against Tranmere, or his goal against Rochdale, possibly. Probably the only near contenders, I think, for that. But yeah, fantastic. I think there was one other award there. I just missed it. Obviously, I should give a shout out as well. Special recognition award was given to Barry Mossop and Ian Gray, who've retired from their roles helping out with the ball boys.
I know Barry personally, known him for years. He's a good player. When Ian's one of the two regular lads on B stand, so hopefully he'll be taking a seat instead of watching people in seats.
Yeah, fantastic. A little quick shout out as well for the ladies' player of the season, which is I'm really sorry. Is it Kyra Bland? Ciara. I'm not sure how you. Kira. You're probably right there. Kira Bland. So congratulations, Kira. Apologies for pronouncing your name wrong at the start there, but fantastic to get her award as well. That's the awards covered. So let's get right into the meaty stuff now, then, guys. It's the retain list, and. Well, I'll go through it first, basically. That's the easiest way to do it. So we know who's been contracted for next season. There's no discussions about players being told they can go from those. I think Simo quite sensibly wants to have a look at Tristan Abrahams because he's not really seen him, obviously, because he's been out on loan. Best bit of news, first of all, Morgan Feeney is under contract for next season because we've activated the clause. So
and
he stays.
Simpson has indicated he wants to talk to him about a better contract.
Yeah. That's great news.
This is John Mellish. You listen to the Brunton Bugle.
Just a reminder to everyone, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast using whatever podcast app you use, whether that be Pocket Casts, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you just click subscribe, and every time a new episode comes out, it'll go straight into your inbox, so you don't have to mess around trying to find it. Also, as well, if any of those podcasts give you the opportunity to review the podcast, please do give us a review, and a 5-star review would be fantastic. It means we move up the charts and that kind of thing, and more people find out about the podcast. Also, this season, the podcast has been sponsored by the Cal United Sports Club London branch. The London branch is open to all Cal United fans. They've got members from Cornwall to Dundee and Houston to Singapore, and of course every part of London and the South East. They regularly meet up on away trips, as well as arranging many social events, sports games and fundraising for the club. All season they've been providing us with information for away games as part of the preview section, and hopefully next season they'll be doing the same as well. You can find out more about the London branch at their website, carlisle.londonbranch.org. Right, so the players have been offered deals, new deals. Taylor Charters, Brendan Dickinson, Magnus Norman and Joe Riley. We'll talk about Joe Riley first in a minute, obviously. Second year scholars who graduated, Gabe Breeze, Jack Ellis, Sam Fishburne, Max Kilsby and Scott Simons. So the players released are Luis Alessandra, Danny Devine, Mark Howard, Manny Mampala, Rod McDonald, Kelvin Meder, Gimme Toure and Jamie Devitt, but Devitt has been told that he can come back for training. He's been invited back for pre-season training. We'll touch on that in a minute because it basically sounds like if he's fit, he gets a contract, basically. Loan players returning to their parent clubs. Shout out, the club have actually mentioned it. Lucas Jensen has returned. He returned in January. Unbelievable. Tyrese Amatoya, Mitchell Roberts, Dinell Simiu, and Owen Windsor. Now, before we go on, Dan, you want to do a little bit on Windsor because obviously it's been... Simo's spoke about him tonight, hasn't he?
Yeah, it turns out that Windsor was suddenly told by West Brom several weeks ago that he'd be getting let go at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And I don't think he took it too well, to the point where he sort of said to Paul Simpson, I want to go back. You know, I want to... And I think Paul Simpson basically sat down and said to him, you know, you won't be able to play football apart from us or West Brom under-23s. And, you know, if they're not keeping you, chances are you're not going to play for them, you know.
Yeah.
And but no, he wanted to go back, and Paul Simpson, you know, he's worked with a lot of young players from his England times and that, and he was like, look, we're not going to stop in your way, and he went back. I would have thought personally it'd have been better trying to get on the bench here and getting on. And
yeah, exactly.
You know,
I think he needs to get himself moved to a National League club or similar, doesn't he? And just get himself a bit of football as much as anything, and just try
a Solihull or someone would be ideal for him.
Go something like that and actually play some football week in, week out, because these loan spells are not working for him every time he goes somewhere.
Kidderminster, or you know,
realistically, he's not going to be Football League level. I genuinely think he impressed in that first game he played against Port Vale. I think he could do well at maybe a National League or National League North level. So, I mean, good luck to the lad. He clearly just didn't work out for him, and the rest of the lads obviously similar. They just didn't work really. Did it for most of them, bar Dinell basically. So good luck to them. All right then. Well, let's get some of your views, guys. Mike, do you want to start off? What's your initial thoughts on the retain list?
I mean, for me, I think the biggest sort of shock is Magnus Norman getting a new deal. I think the rest we all kind of predicted, didn't we, really? It seems a bit baffling to me, but maybe Simo's scared of not having any keepers going into pre-season. I don't know, but yeah, it seemed a bit of a weird one.
Well, you picked up on that one, Dan, didn't you, in terms of Magnus Norman and Paul Gerrard?
Yeah.
I think there's been an bit of input there.
I just wondered if Paul Gerrard has sort of said, I think there's something to work with here. You know, I'm not saying he's going to be number one next season. I think with Howard going, I think Paul Simpson probably has someone in mind.
Yeah.
Or a short list of keepers. If Norman signs, because obviously he's got to decide if he's staying or not yet, I would imagine Gabe Breeze and Scott Simons will more than likely go out to play football.
Yeah, at least one of them will.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wondered if they maybe thought, he's a big strong lad, Magnus Norman.
Well, one of my mates was pointing out to me, Ian. He was saying like there's a good market as a goalkeeper to be a good solid number two as well, to develop yourself to be a player who's capable of coming in and doing a job. he might not stay here forever, but he knows he's always going to go to clubs, and the club will go, well, I can get him in, and actually we can, we can rely on this lad to come in when we need to. And you maybe bob around a few clubs, but you earn a decent wedge, don't you, to do that? Yeah.
Am I correct in that Magnus Norman has a girlfriend who's local?
May well do. He seems to be quite settled here, doesn't he? Because he likes going on his fell walks, doesn't he? Stuff like that, a bit like Big Toby. And,
on his Instagram and his Twitter, he's been at Silleth, Allenby, Derwentwater, so he clearly likes the area. And I'm pretty sure he certainly did have, I assume he still has, I've no, it's none of our business, but I'm pretty sure he had a fairly localish partner. So.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, with him, I think we all three of us agreed we would have let him go last week. But I'm not. It's not one of those ones like I'm furious about the fact that they're keeping him, because the keepers do develop at different rates, don't they? And you never know. He might well turn out to be a decent keeper, and I think he'll stay out of the four. I think he's the one definitely most likely to stay. I think Taylor Charters is going to stay. I think that's pretty much agreed. He flew out on Monday morning, so he must have spoken to Simo before he went, probably. I'm guessing Simo knew that obviously this season been different.
And I noticed also regarding that, apparently Joe Riley's on a coaching course this week, and he had already been spoke to before Monday. Because
yes. And now we know
they were happy for him to go on his coaching course.
And now we know he's not going to be staying, because he's told the world on Twitter before he even told Simo directly himself that he was going to be leaving the club, which is, I'll be honest, I think it's a bit poor. If I'm fair, if Simo's giving him the good grace to speak to him before all the other players, when he should, he could have said to him, you shouldn't be arranging coaching courses knowing that you're going to get spoken to on Monday about your thing. He's been pretty good to him, Simo, there. For Simo to then find out on Twitter, I don't think it's very good form. I think he'd made his mind up before he got the contract, because
I think
Simo obviously hinted after the Bradford game, a player being tapped up. I know a lot of people thinking now maybe it isn't him, and I still think it might well be, to be honest. I think
but at the same time, I do agree that it's poor form, but it's better to know now than sort of drag it out and,
I'm pleased we know now, but what I'm thinking is, just tell Simo yourself. Yeah. Just message Simo and say, look, I'm not going to take the deal. I've had an offer somewhere else. I think Simo knows deep down he was going to go anywhere. I know there's a few whispers that it was Rod McDonald was the player who's tapped up, so to speak. But I think it's a younger player, because it strikes me as someone who's not made many moves in their career, isn't quite aware that this kind of thing happens. So, I mean...
It's give me 2 days to AC Milan, but don't tell anyone.
Yeah. But yeah, in terms of Joe Riley, I mean, Danny, are you gutted to see him go? I mean, I said it on the pod last week, didn't I? I was on the fence a little bit about this one. My thoughts were...
I like him as a squad player. I don't think he's done enough to command a starting place.
No.
But in fairness, he's not had that much of a chance to prove it this season. I mean, it sounds daft because, he had 80-odd appearances for us. But... 3 managers weren't overly keen on him this season. No. Which, there's alarm bells there, isn't there?
I don't know, some people say, but he's been playing out of position. He never played midfield before he joined us. He was a right back and a right wing back at Man United.
And he also played left back as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
Occasionally.
So it's not like he's been a midfielder all his career and suddenly he's been shunted there. He's played there most of his career. For us, he's played midfield, and he never really grabbed a game by the scruff of its neck and just ran the game, did he? He'd have those moments. He'd have those bursting moments.
Beside Callum Guy, he looked awkward.
Yeah, and Guy's the kind of player who will grab a game out of scruff of neck and just take all the ball and start spraying about. Feeney had those explosive moments, and fans love that. They love that, that run down the pitch where he nearly scored that brilliant goal against Mansfield, I think it was. Yeah, things like that. That's what fans love. When actually, you sometimes need a player like a Callum Guy who just keeps it ticking over and keeps the game running. I think potentially there could be a really good player in Joe Riley, but like I said, I don't think, I don't know about you, Mike, but I don't think he's worth breaking the bank for, I don't think he's a player you'd necessarily build a team around.
No, I mean, he's one for me. I think in terms of his ability, he should have been getting more goals and assists.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He's one of them where, almost like Dickinson in a way, where you think if we maybe had a better team, he'd sort of be a star player, but you need someone who can turn you into a better team, and not just be a star player when you are a better team.
Yeah, absolutely. It's look, the reports are he's going to Walsall. That's what we've heard, isn't it? And that seems to be nailed on to be announced in the next few days, probably, I guess. Although I do wonder if he might say to them, "Can we just delay it a couple of weeks? It doesn't look like you've tapped me up now."
Yeah.
After it sounds like his agent's been blowing hot air up his backside a little bit, maybe, and in the nicest possible way.
I think people don't realise as well. He's 26 next season.
Yeah, he's not young.
He's not 22, 23.
No, exactly.
26-year-old League Two. He should be playing every week.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
No disrespect to Walsall, but if that's sort of the best offer that he's getting,
it's not like Amari Patrick last summer, is it? Amari Patrick got an offer from League One. We all turned around and said, fair enough, he's going to test himself at a higher level. Didn't quite work out for him, but he's come back actually a better player to us. That was fair enough. If you move into Walsall, I know they've come into a little bit of money with this pound-on deal, but yeah, not convinced. Well, let's move on to the final play, because we sort of briefly touched Taylor Charter. We all sort of agree, fair enough, he's going to be a player who might develop, and Simmer sees a player who can play about 4 or 5 different positions, doesn't he? So you clearly rate him there. The one that seems to have divided fans quite a lot, and quite a lot coming on the negative side of it, Brennan Dickinson. I did say last week, didn't I, on the pod, I felt he might, I didn't say necessarily I'd give him a deal, but I felt he might get a deal, because I just felt like Simo clearly trusts him and likes him as a player. Your initial thoughts on this one, Dan?
I can see why he's given it. I think, first of all, I think he's had a blighted career at Carlisle. He's had 2 or 3 injuries. He's actually played a lot more games this season than you realise. He must have played 40 games this season, without realising. Yeah. Last season, he literally played a dozen. He had a couple of bad injuries. But again, I think, especially in recent weeks, he's been a victim of the injuries we've had. And if I asked both of you what's his true position,
left wing back,
could you give the same answer and nail it?
I would have said left wing back, definitely. I feel like if you get him right in the right shape at the start of the season, I think he could be really good at that.
Well, you could say a left wing back, you could say a left midfield, you could say a left wing.
Yeah,
I don't think he's a centre midfielder cutting in.
Yeah, I don't think he's a centre midfielder. To be fair, I think he's been a bit hard done by in terms of that, hasn't he? And
I think if we had some centre mids, we'd have probably seen him in sort of a left wing back or a different position. But because of the injuries that we've had in centre mid, he's kind of been forced to play there. But Simmer obviously rates him.
Simmer apologised basically and said, "I feel like I should apologise to him because I've had no choice but to play him there." But he's never once complained, and I know he's got a bit of stick from fans sometimes, and he's sometimes given a bit back. But I've always said, if fans give you stick and you get it back, don't complain. It happens. There you go.
I also wonder if some of it is looked as a senior man, because he's 29-year-old.
Yeah.
He's been round the block. He's been a couple of years at Gillingham, Colchester. He's played plenty of games in his career.
Yeah. But before we move on, it should be said, he could still turn down the deal. There's no guarantee he's going to sign it, and I do wonder. There's reports he's put his house on the market and stuff. So.
Is there?
Well, possibly. I don't know if it's true, but there's some rumours going on.
Not that I'm a stalker of any kind, but I do know where he lives because someone told me. That's the only reason I know. So I can soon find out if it is for sale. But no, I do remember when he signed, Chris Beach saying that Brennan and his partner committed by buying a house up here, which there's not many footballers do that in this day and age.
No, that's a fair point. Well, let's talk about the release players then. I mean, what I'll do is I'll box off 3 of them straight away. Divine, Mampala, Toure. I'm not surprised, really, to be honest. I mean, all 3 of them. Divine, especially, if you can't get into centre midfield ahead of Brennan Dickinson, in that run-in, then you've not really got much hope.
He reeks of Geisley.
Yeah, I think he'll end up somewhere like that, probably, to be fair. Of the others, I mean, we'll talk about Mark Howard first, and we'll try and box that off. We sort of briefly discussed it. A little bit of a surprise, but at the same time, he is 35. He might, and he said he wants someone a bit younger, maybe energetic. So, I said down south. Yeah, I said last week. Look, I think he's done really well for us, but I wouldn't be surprised if he moved on, and I'm not hugely surprised he's gone. To be honest.
I mean, he's a good keeper, but I think that there's better out there. There's worse out there as well. But Yeah, I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over it.
No. Your thoughts on that one, Danny? You'd agree?
Obviously, the day after you've just won a
Yeah, all the awards. It
isn't,
looks a bit funny.
isn't
Right?
ideal, but as Paul Simpson sort of alluded to, he said he doesn't want to be at an awards ceremony where we finished 20th and the goalkeepers won all the awards, and he certainly wasn't dissing Mark Howard, meaning that. We all know what he means, But I think between himself and Gerrard, they'll have ideas,
Yeah, because he wasn't the greatest on crosses sometimes, Howard is one. I wonder if that's maybe something they looked at. And obviously with someone like Norman, he's a lot bigger, he should be better on crosses. So
I mean, on next week's episode, we're going to go through people we've noticed in the release list that we think would be good signings, and there's a couple already in the goalkeeping department.
Definitely, I think there's two that me and you, especially Dan, have picked out. I think, they'd be definitely good signings. Louis Alessandro. Sad to see him go, but probably the right decision at this time. Dan?
Yeah, I said last week, you've got Dennis and Alessandra. Dennis has a year, Alessandra doesn't, and that's basically made that decision easy, I think.
There's a lot of talk, isn't there, I think, as well. Alessandra might be effectively said to Simo he didn't want to stay on because there's talk that he's going to go part-time because he's got a bit of a bit that he's set up, I think.
There's also chat about Oldham could be a possibility. From nearby, and
that would work
there's plenty of teams at that level that still give him a good wage, and he'll do a good job somewhere because he's a very clever footballer for me.
Rod and Kelvin, Mike. I mean, Rod's been solid enough the last couple of seasons, hasn't he? But it's one of those ones. If you want to be higher at the table, you probably want to do better than that. And Kelvin came in and did really well at the start, but he's had a few injuries issues, hasn't he? And again, you probably just want someone a bit younger to play in that either right back or wing back role, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I half thought that Mellor maybe sort of that right centre back role would suit him a little bit because he's got height. And one thing I really noticed on Saturday is we lacked quite a bit of height. But no arguments with either of them really. And I think with both of them, they're certainly not going to go to a club that's higher up in the pyramid than us. I wouldn't think.
No, you'd think not. I mean, Rod might find himself. I mean, there's reports of Harrogate for Rod, isn't there? Apparently? So that's probably a fairly decent move for him, and it's not travelling much further than he already is. I think because he's based down in Liverpool. I think Kelvin's a similar area, I'm guessing, so you might get something similar. I don't know, but yeah, wouldn't disagree with that, would you, Dan?
No, good solid pros, but if we're serious about being at the other end of the table next season, not for me. No disrespect to them. Just I think we can do better. Thanks for your service, lads. Best of luck.
Before we wrap up this bit, obviously we've got to talk about Jamie Devitt because obviously he's been told he's been released, but he's been invited back to pre-season training. And if you read his comments, he's basically on Twitter and essentially said, "I'm going to do everything. I love being back in the shirt. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it's not the last time I wear it." And Simo's essentially said how impressed he was with him. He is as a character, and how good he was actually in the games. And said he was a bit unlucky in that normally I'd build up his fitness to get him ready to go in the team, but I had to get him in the team and build his fitness up there. And obviously, as a result, he's got the injury. And he's basically said, if he's fit, he's getting a contract because he said it because of his attitude. Because he said to him, he basically said when he spoke to him, said, "Look, you can come back for the training, but if you find another deal in the meantime, no problem at all." And Jamie basically stopped and said, "No, stop there. I'm going to do everything to try and get a contract next season." And that's the attitude you want, isn't it, Dan? You want players definitely. Who are like that, don't you?
Yeah. I think it's just a matter of if he's fit, I think he'll get something. He maybe won't be on the sort of money he's used to. It could be more a bit of a pay as you play, have his set wage and if he plays. But
I think even if you get 20, 25 games a season out of him now, he could still play a role, to be honest with you.
And he's the kind of player someone like a Taylor Charters could really learn from as well in that role.
Charters, Gibson,
any other young players coming in.
Simo's mentioned both of them as being able to play as a 10 if needed. And, there's not many better at our level than Devitt to learn from.
Yeah, I mean, Devitt these days won't be a 10. He'd be sitting a bit deeper, wouldn't he, than 8, probably, I guess. But,
an 8, yeah.
But it's a real testament to him. He basically made 4 starts after coming back, 4 in a row. And we got 12 points from those games, didn't we?
Can I just say I love using proper old numbers for, positions.
Yeah. What number is he again?
A 20. He's not a 27, but he's a 14.
Yeah, just the way it is. But no, he's you know what I mean. He's been fantastic since he come back in those 4 games, and you could argue those 4 games basically got us out of trouble, and it gave us a real base to build on, and gave us a bit of momentum. And him and Guy looked like they had a good understanding in that midfield as well, which really potentially puts us in the competition.
You wouldn't mind seeing them two with a proper digger just behind them doing the nasty work. You know, the Tom Tayo type role.
I almost wonder even if that
Chris Billy, Tom Tayo, you know.
If those two would work with Gibson just in front of them a bit more often. And see how it works, because give Gibson a bit of freedom. I think Gibson could do the Grealish role potentially, but there you go. Overall, just to wrap that bit up, lads, then feeling is that we're pretty comfortable with what's happening, and there's been a lot of angry reaction about some decisions, but at the end of the day, we finished in 20th place. I think Lummy said this, hasn't he, on the message one? We finished in 20th place. No one can really grumble that much. Back Simmer to do it. If he thinks he can get the best out of Dickinson and Norman and people like that, back him to do that. Really do, because as I said on Twitter and on Facebook, remember back when we got promoted from the conference, he let Tom Cowan and Matt Glennon go 2 days later. And there was an angry reaction then saying, what are you doing that? Why are you getting rid of them? Well, I know we already had Westwood the club. We brought Anthony Williams in as a backup, and he was solid enough, and Westwood stepped up.
Well, Williams was brought in as number 1, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was brought. Yeah, I'm saying he ended up as backup, but Westwood stepped up eventually. They felt he was a player who could do that. And I don't know who the fellow who replaced Tom Cowan was. I seem to remember he did okay. What was his name? Oh yeah, Aaron Aldi. There you go. So back him to do it. All right. Overall thoughts, lads. You're pretty happy then?
Yeah, you can't argue with most of it, can you? Like I said, Dickinson will have annoyed a few, and Riley, but it is what it is. It's happened, and here we go.
Simo we trust at the end of the day.
Simo we trust indeed.
Do you want me to read a few of these quickly?
Yeah, we'll quickly bash through a few of the opinions the fans have sent in, and then
we're up on our Twitter. We ask a few of our listeners, you lovely lot. I've got the first, Chris. The only surprise is Norman over Howard. Is that meaning he's going to be number 2 to a new signing? Unless Howard plans to retire, they must have someone targeted. Also happy that it looks like keeping an eye on Devitt, potentially offered something if he heals up. Fish Island Blues, totally understandable considering the way the market works now. Be more interesting to see who signs on and who doesn't at the end of the month. Exciting summer ahead. Claire, we ended up 20th. Big shift is needed. I wanted so much for the season to work for Louis, but it was too late for him. Surprised about Howard, but like someone says, there's going to be a ton of players out there fighting for contracts. Our mate Nick, about right for me, would have liked Howard to stay. Obviously told him he's moving, no point offering. TF, we don't have your name actually, but just TF. We finished 20th, not good enough. That said, for all those people like and dislike to a man, they haven't been good enough, so change is needed. As Simo said, he'll get some right and wrong, but let's face it, the squad hasn't put a big marker. Another Nick Blando, happy enough, need a good first choice if we're keeping Norman. He thinks he'll be shocked if Dickinson accepts his deal. Another Chris Kendall, still feel like we offer contracts to players who aren't and won't be good enough. We finished 20th for a reason. Keeping a lot of them doesn't fill him with confidence, but he says it's a big summer for Simo.
And then keeping a lot. We're only keeping 3 now out of the 4.
We're only keeping the ones that sign a contract, to be honest with you.
Exactly.
Jim Gaffney and Chris Foster. Jim says must have a keeper lined up, and the pair of them both mentioned Kieran Westwood. I think that's one of them that would be lovely to see, but I'd be very surprised.
He's 3 years older than Howard, and he was practically retired when he signed for QPR. He was training with Crew to keep himself fit, but he didn't want to sign for Crew in League One. Is he going to drop down to League 2 at this stage? I can't see it.
Oh, and sorry, one of them I've just couple rounds. I can't say your name. Magnus Norman isn't good enough to be starting, so why keep Howard as a backup instead of him? He's a bit confused by that one. And then Crispo just mentioned the player getting tapped up and mentioned a few players, but like we said, we'll never officially find out. So.
No, I think Simo kind of regrets that now, doesn't he? I think. But there you go.
But no, thanks for your comments, folks.
I appreciate it.
That's something we're going to try and do a bit more of next season, isn't it?
I should say, Greg Bullman did send me over on WhatsApp. He's a good friend of ours. He sent me an audio file. I haven't had time to download it. We haven't got time to fit it in. But suffice to say, Greg said beforehand he was pretty happy with the decisions and said basically none of the players can really complain, and that Simo clearly sees a player in Dickinson and just back him. So, yeah, fair enough, that from Greg. Right, on to the X-Files section. Not quite as busy as usual. A few little bits out there, though, isn't there?
No, one of the most regular people in it this season, Harry McCurdy, scored again. 3-0 win at Walsall, ensured Swindon get into the playoffs. They play Port Vale.
The dream lives on of him missing a penalty in the semi-final and crying on Sky, isn't it? So there you go.
Yeah. Abraham scored again. I know he's not ex-Blue, but we haven't done a loan update this week, have we? Because it's a bit all over the place with it being the end of the season. So Abraham scored a late penalty for Grimsby. Bad 3-1 defeat at home to Maidenhead for them, though. They're still well in there.
Still looking strong, aren't they? That's the important thing for them,
they're actually doing. They're actually playing right now because we're recording earlier in the week and they're winning. So,
big win.
Yeah, and Connor Thompson scored for Blythe in a 2-2 draw at Gloucester, I think it was. James Tavernier scored again, a penalty for Rangers at home on Sunday.
Should be said as well, he's got to the Europa League final. We didn't because we recorded while that game was on last week, didn't we? So congratulations to him.
He's also the current top scorer in the Europa League this season.
From right back, that's mad, isn't it?
From right back. I mean, he has had 3 or 4 pens in that run, but you've still got to score them.
You do wonder with him, will a club come in for him at some point, maybe? I know Rangers are a big club, you know what I mean, but a Premier League club that could offer him money that Rangers just couldn't compete with. You do wonder if that'll happen. I know he's 30, but yeah, you do wonder about that sometimes.
Yeah. Obviously, on to other news. The big one was Danny Granger has returned to Workington as manager.
Yeah.
They got rid of Chris Wilcock after they failed to go up.
Who saw that one coming?
Well,
everybody, didn't they, really? It's common sense, isn't it, really? I'm sure he'll do well there. That's good news.
Michael Rains has signed a 2-year deal at Stockport Town. He was doing something at Stockport County, wasn't he? And they've both got the same owner from memory.
It's a weird sort of thing, isn't it? Because Jansen's flitted between the two. Yes. He was manager at Stockport Town, wasn't he? And now he's back to doing stuff at Stockport County. So
Rains has gone in as joint assistant manager, but he'll also be playing. So, and that's pretty much it this week. Not much.
Yeah, there's no real bit in terms of players being released. Obviously, I think we mentioned Reece Bennett last week, didn't we? And
there's been odds and sods, but I think we're going to cover them more next week, aren't we? Because most of the lists will be out by the time we record next week.
Yeah, so that's the plan next week, obviously, but we'll cover that in just a sec. But there you go. That's the X-Files for this week then. Oh, wait, hang on. Damn, we forgot one thing, haven't we?
Oh, yes, I just sent this earlier, didn't I? Greg Fleming was in the SPFL Team of the Week for Annan. Annan got through, and then in the final this week against Edinburgh City, I'm actually planning on going to that game on Friday night. So, we're actually doing this recording on Tuesday this week for various reasons, and they're currently 0-0 at half time.
No, it's not bad
in the first leg. So.
Because Edinburgh City have been quite well backed, haven't they, in recent years?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the teams that have come up.
Most of the teams that come up, I mean, I know we're going off topic here, but Bonnyrig Rose played Cowden Beef in the first leg on Saturday, won 3-0 in front of over 2,000.
I love that name. I don't know how many times you'll hear it, but it's an amazing Scottish FA Cup, like third round, whatever it is. It's genuinely one of the best weekends in the calendar just for names and that. Another one we actually forgot to mention. Congratulations to Nick Anderson, promoted in third place. Fun and games in that one, though, wasn't it? I think it's fair to say. I mean, it's a weird one because you kind of feel sorry for Northampton, but at the same time, Scunthorpe have been trash all season.
We had a look, and Scunthorpe have played most of these players in the last half a dozen games, bar one or two of them. So, they're obviously looking at players for next season. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think there's only about 2 or 3 senior players actually left in the squad. I think the rest have been told not to bother because they're going at the end of the day. And the rule is, I think you have to pick 4. I think once you get to, I think it's the third weekend in March, you have to pick
so many who played the last game.
Yes,
and all
it's
that,
like
don't
four.
they?
I think it's 4 players or something like that. So it's to give it some form of integrity. But at the end of the day, it's Scunthorpe's choice, and they've been rubbish all season. I mean, putting a 17-year-old in net is a little bit dodgy, frankly. But
what if the main keeper did have an injury? You know,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
it had Northampton have raised concern, but they have accepted the result apparently.
yeah, I think it's one of these things that the EFL might re-look at that rule and see how do we make it better. But Scunthorpe have been one of the worst teams the EFL's ever seen, frankly. So it's not a huge surprise really that they got beat. What I'd say is big shout out to Fraser Horsfall for his handball against us. That's basically cost them promotion. That one extra point they would have got if they hadn't conceded that penalty would have put them up. So there you go. And there's a lot of talk as well that actually they had Barrow on the ropes and they just sat back in the second half and didn't have a go. So there you go. So that's the X-Files. We finally wrapped it up. There you go. Okay, lads, there you go. A little bit of a smaller episode today, basically. We're just covering off those bits. We'll be back towards the end of next week with the next episode. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to do our sort of mini-season review of how things went for United, look by months, have a little look at I mean, it's going to be a horror show for up till about February, isn't it, I think, for most of it. But talk about some of the weird decisions. We'll certainly be using the clown car noise a lot on that episode, I think it's fair to say.
For the last time.
Yes, we hope so. We might even get to see what our new kit's going to be like by then. You never know. I mean, chances are fine, I suppose. I know. But we'll do that, and what we'll do as well is we'll have a look through our predictions from last season. Mike has managed to collate them all. They're generally not very good, but I think I'm going to be quite happy with in terms of getting who finished top right. I think someone got both relegated sides right as well, possibly. I can't remember who that was. Yeah. Was it Dan? Well, there you go. Oh, Mike, you're not having a great one here, are you? By looks of things. No. But, I think all of our playoff positions were absolutely terrible. But there you go. Yeah. As well as that, what we'll do is we're gonna go through the release lists and we're gonna pick out a few targets we think might be worth looking at for the Blues, trying to keep it as sensible as possible. But we always get excited about these kind of things, don't we? But there you go. Well, that's it then, guys. Mike, Dan, thanks very much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening, and up the Blues.
Up the Blues.